Did you know that the New York Times actually wrote an entire article about Uyghur separatists funded by the US government having mental breakdowns because they're basically exiled overseas and they're having a difficult time coping with this situation they and the US government got them into? At first glance, it doesn't look like that, but I will show you how the New York Times actually really did write an article about that. But first, I want to show you Nury Vitachi. And if you're not already following him on Twitter or on YouTube, I am going to put the links in the video description and in a pinned comment at the top of the comment section so that you can follow him. He's got very interesting and very short and to the point videos. So it's a great way to get a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And he's talking about this article as well. And I think he makes a really great point, actually many great points. So please check that out. And he's the one who directed my attention to this article in the first place. But let's take a look at the article itself. So it's relatively recent. A daily cloud of suffering. A crackdown in China is felt abroad. And it sounds like China is just irrationally cracking down on these Uyghurs. And all throughout this article, they're going to try to claim like China is just paranoid, going after the Uyghurs for no reason, and all of these people are suffering because of it. But I will show you how that is absolutely not true, according to the Western media themselves. But let's get back to here. As Uyghurs grapple with the emotional trauma of their families suffering back in Xinjiang, some are overcoming a cultural stigma to seek out counseling. And so we've got Mustafa Aksu, and Nury points out that he claims all of these people in his family died. They never say how they died, where they died, under what circumstances, or whether China was involved or not. And when there's something serious like this that happens and they're very ambiguous about the details of it, it's because they want you and your imagination to draw the worst conclusion possible without them having to lie and say, oh yeah, somehow China was involved in it. But anyway, so they're saying he's struggling with this, all of these problems. Poor Mustafa, he's crying all the time. He's waking up in pools of his own sweat. And we come down here and they mention Louisa Grieve, Director of Global Advocacy for the Uyghur Human Rights Project in Washington. And I will get into who they are in just a minute, but I also want to show you that Mustafa, who the New York Times begins the article talking about, he is also working for Uyghur Human Rights Project. So what is the Uyghur Human Rights Project? And why is the New York Times talking about it? And why don't they tell us this little bit of information that I'm about to show you? So first they mention Louisa Grieve. And so this is Louisa Grieve's LinkedIn profile. It's publicly available information. She's a very public figure. And if you scroll down here, you will see that right there, she spent 24 years at the National Endowment for Democracy. I mean, that's enough at some companies to go into retirement. That is a long time to work for the National Endowment for Democracy. And we know what the National Endowment for Democracy is. It assumed all of the responsibilities of the CIA in regards to US-sponsored regime change. The New York Times, the Washington Post over the years have all admitted that. And if you look at the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy, you will see that the people sitting on there have nothing to do with human rights or democracy. They are all, some of them are literal criminals, war criminals, not convicted, but obviously war criminals, people who have directly participated in regime change campaign after regime change campaign. That's what the NED is. It's a regime change organization. So that's who Louisa Grieve worked for 24 years. And then the New York Times is saying she shifted over to the Uyghur Human Rights Project. So let's come over here. So this is the NED. The NED funds the Uyghur Human Rights Project. So Louisa Grieve goes from running the NED, helping run the NED, and then shifts to an organization that the NED funds. And now what about this organization that the NED funds? This is the Uyghur Human Rights Project's official website, Who We Are. And what does it say here? The Uyghur Human Rights Project promotes the rights of the Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslim peoples in East Turkestan, referred to by the Chinese government as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. East Turkestan does not exist. It is a term that only separatists use, and state sponsors of violent separatists. So here's the NED also referring to Xinjiang as East Turkestan, but at least being nice enough to recognize that it's part of China. But most people using this term East Turkestan imagine that China is somehow occupying Xinjiang. They're not. It's part of China. Everyone recognizes that on Earth under international law. So that's who Louisa Grieve is a part of, this organization that sees Xinjiang as East Turkestan. And so this is a separatist organization funded by the US government, meddling in China's internal political affairs and recruiting these Uyghurs into this separatist movement, this separatist agenda. Again, completely funded by the US government, in violation of the UN Charter, in regards of non-interference and respecting the territorial integrity of other sovereign nations. So this is what the New York Times is writing about, but notice how they never mention any of that in their article. So I thought that was really interesting. I want to show you this. In the United States, the Uyghur Wellness Initiative has built a small network of therapists to work pro bono with the community. So what is the Uyghur Wellness Initiative? Where are they getting their money from? Who are they associated with? Let's go over to their website. Here it is, Uyghur Wellness Initiative. Uyghur Wellness Initiative. At least they don't refer to it as East Turkestan, but who are their sponsors and partners? All of these are US government funded fronts, except for this one, which appears to be some sort of Christian charity, but just like World Vision supposedly a Christian charity, but then it ends up just being a front for the US State Department. And then one more thing I want to point out is down here. The New York Times is talking about these Uyghur separatists having a meltdown working for all of these US government funded fronts, although they don't really put it that way. And then they say, in regards to China, determined to eliminate perceived threats of ethnic separatism, the authorities in China have detained as many as 1 million Uyghurs and others in internment camps and prisons. And I have pointed out time and time again, and I have showed you what happens if you click on that link. It's going to bring you to another article that brings you to another article that brings you to another article that references you back to the original article. There is no evidence of 1 million Uyghurs in detention centers in Xinjiang at all. This whole genocide story is made up. It is to China what WMD's was to Iraq. Now, I want to get back to this perceived threats of ethnic separatism. There was no perceived threat. There was an actual threat. There was concerted, horrific terrorism and violence that spanned many years, was killing people in Xinjiang, and not just police and military or people in the government, but also just ordinary people. And not just Han Chinese, who these Uyghur separatists see as occupiers, but also other Uyghurs who they thought were impure and not practicing the right version of Islam, which ironically to these extremists was imported from Saudi Arabia. It was Saudi-sponsored Salafism, and it was overriding indigenous Uyghur Islam. And then it was pitting these radicalized extremists against people who have been practicing Islam in the region for generations. That was the original cultural genocide, and it resulted in actual mass murder. Unlike the U.S. and its claims against China, this was actual mass murder. It's been captured on camera. Now, I was tempted when I saw perceived threats of ethnic separatism printed in the New York Times. I was tempted to show people the footage of these attacks, but I won't, because then it'll get age restricted, and then no one's ever going to see this video. Not even my regular viewers will be able to see this video. So I will describe it. These extremists were so out of their minds and so radicalized that they would just walk up to ordinary people. And again, not police or soldiers, just ordinary people going about their daily business. They could be Han Chinese, they could be Uyghurs, and they would just start with a knife just sawing their head off their shoulder. or chopping them up into pieces in the streets, or blowing themselves up in a market into little pieces, or driving their car into a crowded square and running people over. In 2015, there was a bombing here in Bangkok carried out by these extremists. In Kunming, there was a train station attacked by these extremists who were using knives and swords to just chop up and run people through to death. And then thousands of them traveled to Syria to join ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So it was not perceived terrorism or a perceived threat. It was actual violence on a massive scale, killing thousands of people a year, and people not just in Xinjiang, but all across China, all across Asia, and then all the way as far as the Middle East. So what is the New York Times talking about? Why do they do that? Because they're not journalists, and they're not trying to inform you. They're trying to deceive you. They're trying to manipulate you. This is supposed to be a big sob story about these poor victims of Chinese oppression, and what the depression and the malaise that all of these people are in is because the United States government is using them as pawns. And this idea that they're actually going to establish East Turkestan and live independently of China is a pipe dream that will never, ever come true. So the US is using them, exploiting them to drive this propaganda campaign against China. They know that Xinjiang will never be carved off of China. Even if they could get the violence going again, they know that that's not really ever going to happen. And because these people that they're exploiting are being fed the notion that this impossible task is somehow possible, they end up mentally ill. They end up depressed. They end up their entire lives passing them by, not seeing their family. A lot of their families are alive and well in China. They just don't want to talk to them because they're extremists, they're separatists, and they're trying to hurt the country that their family members actually still live in. So it's tragic. And on one hand, you say they're grown adults and they should know better, and they should be able to recognize that the United States, who has lied about all of these other countries and killed millions of people all around the world, are not actually interested in helping the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. But then on the other hand, you have to understand these are not, they're not well-educated people, some of them, and a lot of them are extremely emotional. Some of them are brainwashed. And then when they go to Washington or they go to Germany or London, that powerful brainwashing gets reinforced by these people who seek to use them. They give them a budget, they make them feel important, and it's just a cycle that feeds into itself. So this New York Times article is actually about US-sponsored Uyghur separatists going crazy because the US has tasked them with an impossible mission they will never achieve. The US doesn't care. They're getting their money's worth by using them to depict China as this oppressive, tyrannical, genocidal, authoritarian nation, and they don't actually really care what ends up ultimately happening with these Uyghurs. And if the Uyghur people who are getting sucked into this don't believe that, just ask anyone who was part of the South Vietnam project the US was running there for a while during the Vietnam War. Ask how all of those people turned out. And one last thing about Louisa Grieve and the Uyghur Human Rights Project. I want to show you that this goes beyond just Xinjiang and China and targeting Beijing. This lie is being spread all over Asia as part of the Milk Tea Alliance. This lie is being told to all of these young activist groups that the US is propping up and hoping to use to pressure or overthrow China-friendly governments in the region. And this was NetToIt. NetToIt is one of these Western-friendly student agitators in Thailand that are behind these protests we see in the streets. And here he is on his Twitter account. Well, he's got a blue check mark too. And he was at the Oslo Freedom Forum as well. And I'm not sure if he made it on Time Magazine or not. And if he has it, I'm sure that this is one of the primary reasons he continues doing this. He's the Thai version of Joshua Wong. Today, our political science student union will hold a talk by Louisa Grieve about Uyghurs in China and how we can help them. And there she is. And there's the notoriously abused propaganda picture that they all use. And there's Netwit. He's holding an umbrella, and that's not a coincidence. He was a really big supporter of the US-backed mobs in Hong Kong. And he actually tried to invite Joshua Wong to Thailand, and the Thai government turned him back at the airport and told him to go back to Hong Kong. So it's not just about China and Xinjiang. When the US is working on these projects, it's a very region-wide effort, actually a very global effort. There's a lot of moving parts, so just be aware of that and keep your eyes open. And I will continue keeping an eye on it. Again, check out this short video by Nury, and also follow him on Twitter and YouTube. Also, if you thought this video was useful, please like and share it. Think about subscribing. It's free to do, and it helps the channel grow. I have a website, newatlas.report. There are no paywalls. There are no ads. You can find and follow all of my work there. I'm also, for the time being, back on Twitter, so follow me at Brian_Berletic until I get kicked off again, which I'm sure is any day now. And also in the video description, there are all of the links to the articles that I referenced. There are also ways in the video description where you can help support my work. To everyone who has been, whether it's through Patreon month to month, or one-time donations, or even if you're just helping share my work, it is tremendously appreciated. I could not do this work without that, so thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.